Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and this is going to be a Homelab series about networking, and this is going to be the first episode where we are going to do Homelab projects that demonstrates our skills in networking concepts. So for the first project in this Homelab series, we are going to do a basic LAN setup using Packet Tracer. So for today's Homelab video, the objective is to simulate a small office network with 3 computers, 1 printer, and a wireless laptop all connected to a LAN. We are going to be configuring it and testing it after. So I'm going to show you how it's done in Packet Tracer and also why we are doing what we are doing, and just explain a little bit about the different networking concepts. So if you are learning networking and wanted to do some Homelab projects on your own, you can follow along this video and try to practice with this Homelab setting. Of course, for you to follow along this video, there's prerequisites for this, and you're gonna need Cisco Packet Tracer software on your computer, and that's all you're gonna need. I'm not gonna show you how to get Packet Tracer for your computer in this video. I do have a video for that, but it's not gonna be in this video. So you should already have the Packet Tracer before you get started with this Homelab tutorial. Okay, so this is also what it's gonna look like on Packet Tracer once we are done setting it up and configuring it. So we have a LAN here and we also have 2 networks for the wired network and the wireless network. So this is what we are going to be doing today if you are interested in following along. Also, if you want written instructions for this Homelab, I'm also going to upload the resources and the PDF resources for this on the website eastcharmer.com. I will also add a link down in the description box below, so you can go to resources and then click on the networking folder in here and click on the basic LAN setup Homelab, and that's the PDF that can guide you to the step-by-step instructions if you want to use this later on, especially with the commands. Okay, so let's get started by adding all of our devices into Packet Tracer. So let's get started with the end devices first. So if you look into the leftmost bottom part of the screen, you're gonna see where to drag all of your devices, and if you click on this computer icon here, this is where you're gonna find the end devices, and the Homelab project requires 3 PCs, so let's just drag this here. What's nice about Packet Tracer is that it's easy to set up, especially if you're a beginner and just learning, because everything is preloaded, like the operating system for the devices, so you don't have to worry about that and just worry about the commands and configuration. Okay, so I'm gonna be a little nitpicky in here and just rename the PC 0 since it started with 0. I'm just gonna name it into 3 since we have 3 PCs in here, and just move it right there. Okay, and next let's add the printer. So the printer is also going to be in the same tab. Let's just drag and drop it, and we also need a laptop. So those are all that you can get from the end devices. Okay, now that we have all the end devices, let's move on to our networking devices now, and you can click on this icon here, the very first one, so you can get to the different networking devices like routers, switches. We are gonna need a switch, a router, and a wireless router here. So let's get started with the router first. I'm just gonna do a really basic 2911 in here, no particular reason. Also for the switch, let's just do a 2960 in here. And then for the wireless router, let's click on the wireless devices and let's scroll into this WRT300N. This is what we're gonna use for this Homelab. Okay, so now that we have all of our devices ready, let's connect all of them. Let's get started with connecting all of our PCs to the switch. So before we connect them, I just wanted to ask you, what kind of cable do you think we need to connect the PC to the switch? Okay, so if you want to drag and drop the cable, you can do it by clicking on these connections here. Okay, so going back to the question earlier, what type of cable are we gonna use for this? If you answered a straight through cable in here, the copper straight through, then you are correct. This is what we use if we are connecting PC to switch or switch to router, connecting different kinds of devices together, like the PC in here. So let's connect it to fast Ethernet and then just connect it to the switch just in order. So let's do fast Ethernet 01 in here, and then let's do the other PCs. Okay, so next let's connect the printer because it's also going to be a network printer in here. So we are also going to connect it with the copper straight through because it's a different device to a different device. So let's just connect it to the fast Ethernet and to the next available port in here, which is 4. So we do have our connections now. So you can see everything is lighting up. It's going online now. And next is connecting our switch to router. So we are also going to use straight through in here because they are not the same device. So let's just connect it with the first port in here. And as you can see, unlike the switch where everything is lighting up right away when you connect them together, if you connect anything to the router, it is shut down by default. So you can see the red lights in here, which means that it is offline or shut down. That is normal for the router. It is shut down by default to prevent security risk. So we are going to be manually opening the router later on when we configure it. So you will see this in the very beginning when you are trying to connect this. Okay, so next we are going to connect the router to the wireless router in here. And what kind of cable are we going to use to connect them? So unlike the cable that we have been using earlier, we are going to use the crossover cable because they are the same devices, same type of devices or alike devices. So we are just going to connect it with this internet in here and the next port available. So as you can see, by default, it's shut down. The next tip that I'm going to give you is to provide an IP address, a network IP address, or a subnet to your networks in here. So it'll be easier to configure later on than trying to figure out what IP address you're going to use. So in this Homelab, we are going to have 2 separate networks. One is for the wired network, which is all of this connected to the switch in here, and one network for the wireless network, one where the laptop is connected. So maybe you're asking, why are we doing separate networks for wireless and wired? And that's to also prevent security risk. Like if a hacker was able to get access to your wireless network, at least it's isolated in just that wireless network and they can't get access to the wired network yet. So that mitigates security risk. Okay, so let's start putting network address on our networks first. Let's just click on this icon in here. This is for you to label your devices or your network. So you can think of an IP address that you can use for the network in here. I'm just going to do 192.168.1.0/24, just a really basic subnet for this. And for our wireless network, I'm just going to do 192.168.2.0, so it'll be a different network /24. Okay, so since we are doing DHCP address on our end devices, just like the computers in here, we are gonna be configuring the router next to make it our DHCP server. Okay, so let's click on our router now and go to CLI, which is the terminal. And if you see this question, would you like to enter the initial configuration dialog, just type in no, because we are just simplifying this Homelab. We don't want to set it up with different stuff for now. So what we want to do is be able to enter our commands, just to conft. So the first thing we are going to configure is the default gateway for our wired network, which is this one, and we are using this network address for this network. So just a quick review on what a default gateway is and why it's important to configure, and why we configure it is a default gateway is needed if you want to connect or communicate with other networks aside from your own network, and it usually acts as like the exit point for all of your packets that have a destination for outside of the network. They would know where to go if you have a default gateway. So our first configuration is setting up the default gateway for this network, and it will be on this side because this is where we connected our switch to our router, and I believe this is gig 00. So we are just gonna go to our 00 interface and just type in int gi00. Okay, and then next is to assign the IP address that we are going to use as default gateway to our interface in here. So let's just type the command IP address, and then our IP address that we will assign to this, which is going to be 192.168.1.1, because we are using the .1.0 network, and usually the next IP address after that is the default gateway. And then just type in the subnet mask or the /24, which is 255.255.255.0 in here, and enter. And there you have it. We have a default gateway now for our wired connection in there. So I'm just gonna exit on that and then do the other default gateway configuration for our wireless network in here. So let's type in the interface. I believe it's the next one, which is 01. So let's type in IP address 192.168. It's gonna be .2.1 because we are just following what we have assigned to that network, and just a subnet mask for that, 255.255.0, and hit on enter. And of course, don't forget to save your configuration. Do a write memory command whenever you do configurations. Also, I forgot that we still have our router ports down in here, so we are just gonna enable them and open them up. So let's go back to our interfaces. Let's type in and GI00 first and do a no shutdown, and that's just simply opening up our router port explicitly, and as you can see, it's now lighting up green instead of red. So let's do the other port, which is gig 01. So let's just exit on this and type in and gig 01 and do a no shut, and as you can see, it will all change too. So now we have our ports online now. Okay, the next step is to set up our router as the DHCP server for our two networks. So we are going to configure the wired network and the wireless network for this. And let's just exit out from this. And this is going to be the command that you're going to type for setting up a DHCP server. You'll type IP DHCP pool and the name that you want for this DHCP server. So I'm just gonna name it wired LAN, just so we can differentiate which one is for the wired and the wireless. So next is assigning the network IP address for this DHCP pool. So let's type in the command network, and then we are using this because we have thought of this IP address ahead of time. So it's easier for us now to just type in the command 192.168.1.0 and its subnet mask 255.255.255.0 and enter. And let's just type in or assign the default gateway that we assigned earlier to this. So let's do the command default router. This is the same as default gateway, just assigning the default gateway in here, but just using this terminology for the command. So our default gateway is 192.168.1.1 in here, which is typically the next IP address from the network address that we have given. Okay, so if there is no error message, it means that our command is correct. And let's just exit on this and do the same configuration for our wireless network, which is to type in the command IP DHCP pool and the name of our wireless network. I'm just gonna call it wireless LAN, for example, and enter. And now we are going to assign the network IP address for this. Just type in network command and then our network address, which is 192.168.2.0 and the subnet mask 255.255.255.0 and our default gateway. Okay, so that's going to be 192.168.2.1 in here, and just type in exit. So that is configuring our DHCP server. So we should be able to get DHCP IP address to our end devices now. So we can do a quick test to see if it works, if our DHCP configuration works. Let's go to one of our computers in here and then go to the desktop tab and then click on IP configuration and do a DHCP. So you should see that you have requested DHCP in here, and it will say that it's successful if you're getting an IP address in here and the correct default gateway, because that's what we have set up in here. So let's check our other devices if it's working too. So go to desktop and IP configuration, DHCP. Again, it's successful, and you can see it's just giving you the next available address. Let's go to third PC, desktop, and then DHCP. Okay, it also works on this one. So now we are gonna configure our wireless router and our laptop because it doesn't work the same way as or a wired network in here. So there's also a few more configuration that we can do to set up the wireless router in here. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is to click on the wireless router in here, and then go to the GUI or the GUI in here, and let's go to wireless and make sure that we are gonna set up our SSID here. That's typically best practice when you are configuring wireless router or access points, is putting an SSID, which is the name that you want to broadcast and you want to use so that the devices can connect to the wireless network. So I'm just gonna use the SSID office Wi-Fi in here, and then scroll down and make sure to save settings. You have to save settings all the time, because if you go to the next tab without saving it, it's not gonna keep your changes in here. And let's just change the security mode in here so we can put like a passphrase or a password for the Wi-Fi connection. So I'm just gonna do a WPA to personal for now because I wanted to simplify this, but we should be using enterprise if it's a business. But for now, for the sake of this Homelab, we're just gonna use personal and enter the passphrase office 123 for example, so it will be easy to remember. And don't forget to scroll down and save settings here. So let's go back to the setup in here, setup tab, and just make sure that the router IP has a correct IP address. It should be on the correct network first of all, and we are gonna use the default gateway address in here, which is 2.1 because we are using this 192.168.2 network in here. Just make sure that this is correct and the sum that is correct, and the DHCP server is enabled in here because we made a DHCP server in our router. Just make sure that you save the settings in here. So now let's configure and set up our laptop. Make sure that it is connecting to our wireless router because we just set it up. So click on the laptop and go to physical first, this physical tab in here, and zoom in to as large as you can get it. So as you can see in here, we have two NICs or Ethernet ports in here, and we really wanted to use the laptop wirelessly, of course, to connect to our wireless router in here. So if you add this laptop, it's gonna have this NIC in here by default. So what we want to do is remove this. So what we can do is to drag and drop this module and put it on this tab in here on this side, but you want to make sure to power this off first before doing that because it's not going to let you drag or drop it. So let's try it. So you have to power it off before being able to remove a module or component. So let's remove this because we are going to use a Wi-Fi module instead, like the one with the antennas you can imagine from the older laptop. So that's what we're gonna use to be able to connect wirelessly. So it is called this WPC300N in here. It's our wireless module in here. Just make sure that you have that before connecting or trying to connect to our wireless router, and turn it on in here so we can connect. So when you're done with that, go to desktop and then go to PC wireless. We are now going to connect our laptop to our wireless router. So now we are not connected, so let's go to connect and click this one and then click on refresh. So you can see the SSID or the wireless networks that are broadcasting. So we wanted to connect to office Wi-Fi. Just click on that and click on connect, and it's gonna ask for the password. Just type in the password that you created and then click on connect. And then if you go to the link information, you will be able to see if you have successfully connected to the access point now. So as you can see and you notice in here now, we do have like a wireless signal coming from the router going to the laptop, which means that we are connected now. So that's a good sign. And another good way to test if we are connected and we are on the network is if we are getting a DHCP address because we have set up our wireless network to also get a DHCP address. So let's go to the laptop again, click on it, and go to the desktop and IP configuration. And then as you can see in here, if you select DHCP, it should give you an IP address in here. So that means that our DHCP is working. So for our last configuration in here, we still have to configure our printer in here to a static IP address. It's not going to use a DHCP IP address because that's not best practice. If you're doing this in real life, the printer should be in static IP address because we don't want the IP address to be changing every time it gets rebooted. We really don't care about the IP address for the other end machines like the computers or the laptops, but we do care about our network printer. We don't want it to keep changing the IP address because once it changes the IP address, we can no longer connect to it and have to reprogram or reconfigure our computers with a different IP address. Okay, so first step to this is to think of what IP address you want to give to your printer. So the best practice and a tip in here is to think of an IP address that is outside of the DHCP range, usually that the server is going to give you. So for example, you have set up a DHCP server for the wired network. Usually it will give you a range of like 100 hosts, for example. So you don't want to give an IP address for a static IP that's within that range because you might cause an IP address conflict later on. So it's best to think of an IP address that's outside of the DHCP range. For example, I'm gonna make this 192.168.1.100, so, or 101, just in case our range is from 1 to 100. So at least it's outside the range. So the next thing we're gonna do is to set up the IP address for this. So let's click on the printer and then go to config and go to the fast Ethernet under the interface because that is our connection to it. It's connected through a cable. So let's enter our static IP address that we have prepared in here, which is 192.168.1.101, and the correct subnet mask, which is /24 in here. Okay, so now we have connected our static IP address to our network in here because that's what we wanted. So just to test this, if this is working, let's just go to one of our computers in here and try to ping this IP address. So go to the command prompt under the desktop and just do a ping of the IP address for the printer, which is 192.168.1.101. And if you can see that you can connect to the IP address, then it means that you can get to the network printer. Okay, so that would be it for today's Homelab video. And if you wanted to do more into this setting, you can definitely add more devices, more networks, and more configuration if you want. You can build up on this basic LAN setup. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section and I will do my best to answer the questions. Also, if you are interested in more networking Homelab videos, please check out for the next video in this series. We are gonna build up on this LAN setup in here. We're gonna do more switch configuration and router configuration, so like VLAN, port security, maybe more networks in here, maybe more firewall, maybe more security. So please check those out. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and I hope you learned something. I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.